So for this week in CyberSchool, we're going to be talking all about visual notification. I figured with the upcoming update that we're going to be doing to our outdoor strobes to kind of change the lens that we have on there to make it a little bit brighter, a little bit better in the UV rating, I figured this would be a great time to cover our strobes, which we haven't covered yet. Visual notification is such an important part of a paging system and a notification system, and it's really usually an afterthought that people don't even consider when they're getting a paging system. And it's really something that I always try to recommend to customers when I'm discussing with them about different options in terms of paging hardware and just different things to get paging across is, have you considered any visual notification? But I usually preface that with, do you have any areas of the facility that, are either very loud or would require hearing protection? Of course, if hearing protection is required, it's going to be really hard to hear that fire alarm going off or, that emergency notification of a tornado coming. So, in an emergency situation, you want to make sure that nobody misses that notification. And strobes are perfect for that, because while you might not be able to hear that big loud horn over on the wall because you're sitting there on a lathe, running, making some metal parts on it, you're in a really loud environment, got earplugs in, you'll be able to see that strobe blinking on the wall, and that'll at least get you to kind of turn off your machine and pay attention to see what's going on, to hear that there's a tornado coming or something. So visual notification can be so important to a paging system and is a really good thing to add to it. And as such, we've got a lot of different options for visual notification. We've, of course, got two main versions of our strobe, both the indoor version and the outdoor version. The indoor version is part number 011376, and the outdoor version is part number 011479. We also have it available in the InformaCast enabled version. If you're going to be using InformaCast, it can also do all of the standard SIP functionality, but also with that little InformaCast cherry on top of being able to support all of the InformaCast messages. And the part numbers for those are 011377 for the indoor variant, and part number 011489 for the outdoor variant. And finally, we've also got an accessory option, because you don't necessarily have to go and splurge for a full SIP-capable unit, and you can always just drive an accessory unit off, say, your speaker, your intercom, or your paging amplifier, which can be very powerful, and we'll cover a little bit later. And the part numbers for those are part number 011288 for the auxiliary indoor rated version, and part number 011490 for the outdoor rated version. Same functionality across the board, of course, with the InformaCast variant getting a little bit of extra functionality, but same kind of functionality across the board. They're strobes. So with that kind of out of the way and all the products that we'll be covering today, let's talk a little bit about strobes. What do? They blink. Really all they do. They're just visual notification. They illuminate when something's going on to tell you that a page is coming through. So they can be really powerful, like I was saying, in loud environments. And that can, say, be in a machine shop or an area where you're going to have, loud machines running the entire time and you're not going to be able to hear the announcements going on. They can be useful in, say, classrooms or auditoriums or cafeterias, places where there's going to be usually a high ambient noise level, especially in schools where, you get kids in a lunchroom, they're all going to be kind of rambunctious and loud, the ambient noise level is going to go up. Sometimes it's nice to have a strobe in there, so that way they can hear that, notifications are going on, or, God forbid, there's some kind of an emergency happens. It's great to be able to get that blinking light going on, so that way people know that there's a call going, or some kind of an emergency notification going on. They can also be used in a lot of other types of ways. One of the main ways that we always recommend these is using them in ring groups. So that way you not only get the auditory notification from all the phones in that particular ring group ringing, but you get a strobe on the wall that will also blink. So for example, we use one in the support area. So that way if our support team is up standing around somebody's computer looking at logs together, just kind of trying to determine the best way to handle something, and they're away from their desk, they might not be able to hear their phone ringing. As soon as a call comes in, that strobe starts blinking and they know, hey, there's a call going on, somebody go take care of that call. We can also use one in our sales department. So that way if a sales line comes in and, say, people are talking to Phil, our CEO, and they're in his office and the sales line is ringing, somebody can see that blinking light going on and say, hey, we better go take that call. There could be money on the line right there. There's a sales call. Let's go take that. So they're really good for visual notification. They can also be used in kind of outside of the norm different ways with some of the accessory options. For example, you can pair one with one of our intercoms, and when we pair one with an intercom, say our standard outdoor intercom or indoor intercom, or other intercom-like products like our call buttons, when one is in use, say that they're sending a call as an example, they're calling a particular number, say that intercom at a back door, you can have the intercom that's out the outside of the wall that the truck driver presses when he comes up to let you know that there's a delivery, and you've got the strobe mounted on the inside, so that way you know that, hey, there's somebody at the back door. So not only do you have your phones ringing, but you've got the strobe that's right above that door that's sitting there blinking. So you've got two different ways of notification of knowing that something's going on. So really, at the end of the day, strobes are a great way to supplement that visual notification into the existing notification system that you have. We've got a couple different colors and blink patterns that you can set up on the units, and we'll cover those in a little bit more depth a little bit later. But the units are also ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act. So that way you can coincide, if you have to meet the specific need of that blink pattern to coincide with the ADA Act, our strobes fit that. So they're really great for emergency notification in that sense. You can really do just about anything in terms of with our strobes. So why would you want to use one of these things? First and foremost, they're really easy to install. They mount, say, pretty much just like our regular intercoms. Actually, for the indoor or the outdoor variant, they use the same back box or the mounting plate that any of our intercom products would use. So typically they'd be 3 or 4 screws to mount in the wall, or say if you're going for an outdoor unit, you can mount them on conduit. There's a lot of different easy ways to install them. If you can install one of our intercoms, you can install a strobe. It's basically the exact same way. And another reason is visual notification. They become just so powerful in those loud areas. You know, growing up as a kid, my dad has always worked in a machine shop. So he always, really hit on how this is just something that they always had in the different machine shops that he worked in, was visual notification for things going on. You know, if it's just something as simple as, somebody forgot their lunch and their wife is bringing in their lunch, or, there's some kind of an emergency going on and they need to get people out of that area where there's that high ambient noise level, you got all these machines running, that visual notification, that blinking light on the wall is so perfect for that. And that's really one of the big selling points for these units. They're also really suitable for indoor or outdoor areas with the IP66 rating for the outdoor unit. So you can really throw them into any environment. You can mount them on the outside of a facility, the inside of a dirty facility. You can really put them anywhere with the standard indoor unit that we have or the IP66 rated unit. So they're really ideal for any environment. And at the end of the day, they're just an extra device to provide that additional notification when you're dealing with a ring group. So if you want something just as simple as being able to get a blinky light when a page is going on and you want a call to be, you've got a call coming into a ring group and you want that additional notification, the strobes are absolutely perfect for that. Heck, that's what we designed these units for. So where would you want to use one of these things? They're really best suited, and this is kind of an open-ended statement, but they're really suited for any area that you need extra notification. And that's really different from case to case, where they can be used, say, in a classroom or an auditorium. If you've got, kids and they're being kind of loud, you've got a high ambient noise level, they're great for that. They're good for machine shops if you need that extra notification for emergency notifications, or even just in a regular office scenario where it's not necessarily going to be loud, but you'll have people up walking around chatting about different opportunities or different things that are going on, so that way they see that a call is coming in because they might not be able to hear their phone ringing at their desk. You can use them really in any indoor or outdoor environment because we've got an IP66 rated unit. So they're really ideal for just about anywhere you would want to put them, especially dirty areas like factories. You can really put them anywhere and you don't have to worry about, all that gunk getting in them if they're floating around. Say if you're, using them in a chip factory or something, potato chips, something like that, where there could be, cheese coating kind of flying around in the air. You wouldn't want to have to clean these things out. Well, if they're IP66 rated, they get covered in cheese dust or whatever, you can literally just hose them off and they'll be good to go. So really great for those kind of environments. And really anywhere that hearing protection is required, you want some kind of visual notification because they might not be able to hear that auditory notification that's going on. Other great places are common areas. It was one thing that we always had I can remember in my middle school when I was growing up, we had different strobes that would go on when they were making announcements in our cafeteria. I remember, gosh, I was in 7th grade and there was a big food fight going on, and the principal got over the PA system and, was making announcements, and all the strobes started lighting up and blinking as, there's milk cartons flying through the air, burritos, and all that kind of stuff flying through the air. So strobes can be very useful in just about any environment. Another great place is entrances or exits. So if you've got some place where somebody's going to be going in and out, and you want to be able to not only know if somebody's at that door to deliver you a package, you could have a nice little blinky light above the door, but also with our sensor feature, if you're using the accessory unit and you've got it connected to a intercom, if the door hasn't been closed completely and the door is left ajar and you've got the sensor capability enabled, not only can that intercom make a call or just play audio locally, but it can blink its strobe. So if you get some guy that's kind of sneaky trying to come in at the end of the day, props the door open with a rock, you'd know, not only because that intercom makes a call to, security, what have you, to let them know that there's a door ajar, but you've also got a nice blinky light above that door to tell you exactly what door is open. So there's a lot of different places and ways to use our strobes. So let's talk a bit more about how you use these dang things. Since we've covered where you want to use them and what they do, well, you can use them generally with a SIP call, and they can activate either when a SIP call is being made, i.e. it's ringing, or the SIP call is actually in progress. Can also be used with a message waiting indicator. So if a voicemail is left on a particular extension, the strobe can illuminate and blink to let you know that there's a voicemail left. They can also interact with Multicast, which is very powerful if you've got those emergency notifications going across and you've got different messages being played, say that emergency notification, that all page, or in my food fight scenario when I was in middle school, and they're just making a general announcement, hey, all the yard duties, get to the cafeteria, we got a food fight going on. It's just a really another easy way to get those strobes to illuminate. If you opt for the InformaCast enabled version, either the direct InformaCast enabled version, or you connect it to an InformaCast enabled device, i.e. one of our speakers, intercoms, paging amps, they can also illuminate. Then, like the sensor input that I was talking about, that would be your door sense input. So if your door hasn't been closed completely, your strobe can illuminate. And then finally, we've got what we call an intrusion sensor, which is very akin to a tamper sensor. If the intercom has been moved, the strobe, if the strobe has been moved slightly from its back box, it's got a little optical light sensor in there that will trigger. It takes about ½ inch of movement. So you just barely have to move the thing and it'll trip the intrusion sensor and the strobe can illuminate. It can also make a call, but mainly it can illuminate. So that way you know, hey, somebody's trying to tamper with it, and it might kind of scare off that would-be attacker that, hey, they've got this thing to configure to do something. If I'm trying to tamper with this, I should get the heck out of Dodge because the cops are coming. So there's a lot of different ways to use the strobe. So let's talk a little bit about mounting these. We've covered these a little bit at the beginning, but they really use the same mounting hardware as any of our intercoms. So you mount them just like a regular intercom. For indoors, they've got a nice little wall mount that you would actually mount to, say, your drywall, and then you just mount the strobe directly to it. It's got three little screws that go around the exterior of the side that mount into that mounting bracket, so it makes it really easy to integrate. You can mount them as more of an accessory, and that one, again, is still going to mount in the exact same way, because any of our indoor units, whether they're accessory units or they're the full-fledged SIP strobe, they're going to use the same mounting back box, but when you're mounting them as an accessory unit, say off a speaker, intercom, or amplifier, you need to deal with a little bit of cable routing, and we'll cover that in depth in a couple of slides. And then finally, if you're going to be mounting them outdoor, they mount much like our outdoor rated intercoms. So you've got the regular intercom gang box that you want to fix to the wall, and you want to, of course, adhere with some kind of sealant, so that way you don't get water going in between the wall that you have it mounted to and the actual gang box to seep inside. But after you do that, you've got four screws that actually mount the faceplate of the strobe to the gang box. Really easy deal. You can mount it directly like that. You can do a conduit mount. There's lots of options that, of course, we'll get to with diagrams and everything. So let's talk a little bit more about installation. So here's a nice little diagram that we have for the indoor units. So there's basically two different ways that you can mount it on an interior wall. You can either use, say, a wall cutout, and actually route the cable through the wall. That's really the cleanest unit, so that way you don't have any kind of cables going into the box. You know, you don't have any loose cables, or you don't have those little kind of plastic cable runs that you can get to kind of hide the cable, but you still see the cable run, so you know that there's a cable there. You can cut a hole directly in your drywall, and then with the included drywall screws, you can go and mount the wall bracket to the wall, run your cable through, plug in your strobe, mount your strobe to it. Done deal. Nice clean look. You just got this nice little strobe box sitting on your wall. But if that doesn't work for you, say if you're installing in an area where you can't really run the cable, or you're not dealing with an area with wall internal cable runs, and you're going to be running the cable on the exterior of the wall, there's a nice little channel in that in the back plate, so that way you can run it through and it fits all nicely. As you can see in kind of the middle center of the diagram here, there's a nice little cable entry slot that you can just run the cable through. So it makes it really easy to mount it there if you want to go for that route. And the nice thing is the little sticker that you have pictured here actually comes separately. So that way you don't necessarily have to have the sticker mounted at the bottom of the unit. You're running your cable through the top. You can run your cable through the bottom and have your sticker on the bottom. It's all kind of customizable per that particular installation. Heck, you don't even have to put on the sticker if you don't want it. So that talks a little bit about the indoor installation. Of course, if you're just mounting this thing directly on the wall, this would apply if you're doing the standard sit version or the accessory unit. This is kind of how you would mount it indoors. So now if you want to mount it outdoors, you of course need to go and mount that outdoor bracket. So with the outdoor bracket or the gang box, you've basically got 4 different screws that you'll want to go and get mounted into whatever exterior you're dealing with. Say if you've got a cinder block wall, you want to put lag screws in there to get that to properly mount. Or if you're dealing with more of a stucco style, it's a little bit easier to mount. You're not dealing with cinder block, but you basically want to mount the gang box in there. And then, of course, with that style of configuration, what we have shown here is you'd be using a conduit hole that would route the cables through the actual back of the gang box. And of course, we always do recommend connecting a ground lug to our unit. It's just super important when you're dealing with any kind of outdoor units, especially electronics. Grounding is so important for any product, not only the back of the gang box, but also the front of the faceplate. Not as important with strobes because you're not going to be touching strobes as much as you would with, say, an intercom, but it's super important. And I couldn't tell you how many different support cases we've had resolved by just connecting a ground strap. It blew my mind. I never thought that it was going to be as important as it is when I started working at CyberData. But after you get the unit kind of mounted and you've got your hardware all prepped, you do really want to seal the unit to whatever you're going to be mounting it to. We always recommend some kind of sealant if you're going to be putting it in an outdoor area. Even if it's kind of covered, there's going to be that morning dew that you'll get, and that little bit of water over time will seep in between the wall that you have it affixed to and the gang box and seep in through this conduit hole. And I could only tell you, with the nice IP66 rating we have, I've had customers go and take these things off the wall and get their shoes all wet because the half of the intercom box was full of water. So it's really, really important to properly seal these things to the wall when you install them. You know, frankly, these things aren't cheap. You know, you can be dealing with, a couple $100 invested into this hardware. You really want to protect that hardware if you're mounting it outdoors, and that little bit of sealant that you can put on there goes miles. So after you get it all connected and everything, you basically just have to plug in your CAT cable. And it's got a nice little RJ45 jack that you connect it to, super duper easy. And then finally, after you get it all connected, you just have to adhere the faceplate of the strobe to the gang box with either the standard Phillips head screws that we supply or the Torx security bits if you want to go for a little bit more secure option. Always better to go for secure if it's going to be mounted outdoors. More security is always better if you can. Although the Torx bits are readily available at any hardware store, so it's not super duper secure, but it's just that one extra little bit of deterrent that you can throw in there. So let's talk a little bit more about mounting these as an accessory. So when you're dealing with one of our strobes as an accessory kit, there's no fancy little circuit board that actually interfaces and controls the strobe. It's all controlled by whatever it connects to. So we'll cover a couple different products that you can connect it to, but it's essentially very, very similar depending on what particular product that you're connecting it to. They come with a particular cable that for our indoor unit, I believe is 1 meter, and for our outdoor unit is 3 meters. So that way you get a different length of cable depending on the installation that you're going to deal with. But when you're connecting that one to a speaker, you need to use a particular adapter cable that's included with any SIP speaker that you buy from us. Do keep in mind that you can't use any of these strobes with, say, our multicast speakers. The multicast speakers are really stripped down units. All they do is multicast. If you want any kind of accessories, our strobe or our clock kit, you have to upgrade for the full SIP units. That way you get that full-fledged accessory support. Another thing to keep in mind is because of the actual connection point that we're using here, that's shown right here by the terminal connection, this can only be used by one accessory. So you have to pick either between the clock kit accessory or the strobe accessory. And of course today, since we're talking about strobes, we're going to be using the strobe connection. But it's got this nice little adapter cable that just plugs into the I2C cable that you get with the actual strobe kit that just connects directly to the small circuit board that controls the actual LED strobe board itself, and that just plugs into the adapter cable, and that plugs into the speaker. You mount your speaker however you want to mount your speaker, and then you mount your strobe. So it's a really easy way to do all this, and of course you want to have your speaker unplugged when you're connecting it. You really don't want to hot plug anything because you might damage either that relatively expensive accessory strobe kit or that fairly expensive SIP speaker. So it's always better to just do your due diligence and make sure that everything is unplugged when you're making these connections. You don't want to potentially fry anything. So the actual installation super duper easy. You just, again, connect that cable and then route it appropriately. If you can, run it through the wall. If not, you can use the cutout channels to actually run the cable through and just kind of hide the cable briefly. So there's a lot of different ways to mount that. Next, let's get to installing it with an intercom. For this, we're going to show our outdoor intercom, but it's virtually the same for connecting it to our indoor intercom, of course, because they use the same interior circuit board. And for this particular installation, we're going to show it as a conduit mount. So this is a little bit more complex of our mounting diagrams that we have here. But of course, you're going to want to mount your intercom first and foremost. And for this option, we show either the standard outdoor intercom, kind of pictured right here in the middle. This is our part number 011186. And then down below, we've got our outdoor call button, whose part number is escaping me. I'm not good with part numbers. But you basically just mount either one of those. It's going to mount exactly the same, but you want to mount your back box first and foremost. Of course, with this option, you want to have your conduit hole facing up. There's both a conduit hole in the back of the gang box, so that way you can run your cables through the back of the gang box, but then you can run a conduit out the top of the gang box. And out the top of the gang box is where you're going to run that longer cable that you get with our outdoor rated strobe. It's a 3-meter cable, so you get quite a bit of length to play with, so that way you can mount that strobe nice up and high, makes it really easy to see. Or if you're kind of doing that scenario that I was talking about where you've got your outdoor intercom on the outside of your door and your strobe on the inside, you can route your cable accordingly and be able to get that illumination on the inside of that door. So that way you know not only that your phone is ringing, but you get that nice little blinky light so you know exactly what door to go to. But after you go and mount that, it's pretty simple. You just want to mount your gang box in basically the same exact fashion as you mounted the intercom gang box. Plug in your connector. The connector plugs into the JX terminal of the accessory strobe and the JX terminal of either the call button or the intercom. Any intercoms are going to use that same JX connection, so it's just JX to JX. Really simple, no questions out of it. You're just connecting to that one connector. And of course, for any of these, like I was saying with a regular outdoor strobe unit, if you're putting anything outdoors, do that due diligence and put that little bead of sealant around the outside of that the outside of that gang box, so that way it adheres properly to the wall, the faceplate, and that way you don't have any problems with water seeping in there. You want to protect this investment. Our product's not cheap, and you want to make sure you're protecting that investment. Nobody wants to buy a second intercom because it got full of water, and trust me, it happens. So after you make that connection, it's really simple to work with, and the typical conduit mounts that you'll want to use would just use a typical EMT compressor connection. So they're just a really easy bracket that you put in there, and they're really easy to connect to. And of course, you can pick up a lot of that stuff at your local hardware store. So next, let's move to another kind of complicated installation option when you're connecting it to one of our amplifiers. And here we have it pictured with one of our loudspeaker amplifiers, just because this is what most customers end up getting in terms of our paging amplifier, which is this nice little box, this little rectangle right here in the middle of this big box. When you get the loudspeaker amplifier, you're basically buying the paging amp, this unit here, in a box. So that way it's IP66 rated, you can put it outdoors and you don't have to worry about anything. The box itself has these 3 different options. That way you can route the cables accordingly, because with these, sometimes you're dealing with an AC cable, a data cable, and then you're also dealing with, if you're running the accessory kit, you've got your I2C cable coming out of there. So you're dealing with a lot of cables, and you've got 3 different outputs from the box to be able to deal with. So that way you can kind of route your cables cleanly if you want. So to make this connection, you basically just take that same I2C cable that you'll plug into the faceplate of the strobe kit itself, and that would just plug into the strobe connection on the page again. It's really simple. It's all nice and labeled. It literally says strobe in, so it's really easy to connect to. It's the only 5-pin connector that you have access to, so super duper easy to connect to. And you just route your cable accordingly through one of the different holes that are available on the bottom of your loudspeaker amplifier box. And of course, you'll need a couple different bends on the conduit that you're using. Of course, pick up your local hardware store, see what Lowe's, Home Depot, see whatever they've got for you, and pick that up. And you'll just want to mount the gang box for the strobe in basically the same manner that you've mounted it in all the other examples. You want to get that mounted to the wall with the 3 different screw brackets that you can use in there. Probably tie your conduit to the wall as well, just in case of any earthquakes. That's something we're always trying to consider out here in California. We get a lot of earthquakes, and we always got to be considerate of that. And of course, seal the unit to whatever you're affixing it to, so that way you don't get any water seepage in the back. And then finally, just plug the I2C cable into the 5-pin connector on the faceplate of the strobe kit. Super duper easy connection, and this kind of gives you an idea of tying the accessory kit into all of the different peripherals that you can actually connect it to: the intercoms, the speakers, and the paging amplifier. So next, let's talk a little bit more about the blink settings. Now that we've kind of covered what these things do, where you put them, how you install them, let's talk a little bit more about what these things can do. So the blink settings, we'll kind of cover this in sections. So first and foremost is the scene. And the scene is the actual blink pattern that will be used. And we've got a total of 5 different, well, technically 6, because I guess not blinking is technically a scene, but really 5 different options that you can use. You can use the ADA option, the American with Disabilities Act option, which is just white. So when you select the ADA option, you can only select the brightness, which is shown in the second column here of our image. And the brightness is measured from 0 to 255. So of course 0 is off, 255 is full brightness. In my experience, most of the time people keep the brightness or the intensity at full power. There's really not too much of a reason that you want to turn it down. You can if you want, but most people just leave that at the max brightness. And of course, when you're dealing with ADA, all of the other options, either color or the individual RGB values, red, green, and blue, are all grayed out, because if it was any other color than white, it wouldn't be ADA compliant. So if you're picking ADA, you pretty much just set your brightness and go. So then from there, we've got 4 other different kind of blinking modes. So we've got slow fade, which is kind of a breathe in, breathe out, where the light will increase in intensity to the brightness that's set, sit there at that brightness for a moment, and then fade back out to 0. So that way you get a fade in and fade out. And we've got that same example, but done quickly, where it will almost in, twice the speed, it will fade in to max brightness and fade out to minimum brightness. So that way you get either that kind of quick breathe in and quick breathe out, or that slow breath in and slow breath out. So you get 2 different options in how you want the unit to illuminate. And then of course, we've got your standard blink, where you've got your blink on, blink off, blink on, blink off for your slow blink. And then of course, for your fast blink, 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 blink. So that way you've got the multiple different options of how you want the strobe to illuminate. You can either have it kind of fade where it'll be on for a little bit longer, or that just quick or slow blinking option where it's just at full brightness, no brightness, full brightness, no brightness. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to go and determine how you want the unit to actually illuminate. So next we get to color. And for color, we've got a whole bunch of different preset options that you can pick in there, from red, green, and blue to different variations, purple, pink, lime, a couple different configurations that we like out of there. But if you want a particular color of, say, sky blue or something really fancy, you can set your own custom RGB value in there. And the RGB values are, of course, rated from 0 to 255, your regular hexadecimal, although we take your standard digits. You would, of course, enter 0 through 255 to set the particular values, but it gives you a lot of capability if you want to create something custom, if you want to do something a little bit outside of the norm. And then, of course, after you get all that set, you can hit the preview button to see how that color looks, because you might like a particular color of pink or a particular shade of blue, but then you implement it and you try it and like, oh, that looks like crap. Let's try a different color. So you've got that preview capability to be able to see what color you actually set in there and how it manifests and how it looks. So that kind of gives you an idea of how this thing will actually operate. Now let's talk a little bit more in depth about the different options and how you can actually configure this thing. So for our SIP calls, as we were talking about, this thing can be activated when it's in a SIP call. You've got three main options that'll interface with our primary SIP extension, which would be the normal extension that'll be used with this unit. You've got the blink on ring, so when the extension number, the primary extension number, is ringing. Then you've got the blink strobe on call option, which will blink when the actual extension number, the primary extension number, is in a call. And then finally, we've got the message waiting indicator that will illuminate if there's a voicemail that's left on the particular extension of the primary extension. So that way you get that a lot of different capability, whether the unit is ringing, whether it's in a call, or whether a message is waiting, and you can have independent colors for each different option. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and even blink pattern capability for all these different options. And then finally, of course, with all of our CyberData products, we support that night ringer capability. So that way, if you're using that secondary extension, the night ringer extension, say you tied that into a ring group, you can set a particular blink scene when that particular night ringer extension is ringing. So it gives you a lot of different capability when you configure all of these different options. You can set a lot of different blink patterns that can all coincide at the same exact time. You can have your night ringer extension blinking green like we have shown here, and then your SIP call, if the unit's actually in a call, it can show a red color. So you get a lot of different options and capability just based off these different options. And that's one of the nice things about having an LED-based strobe. You can show different colors at once. You don't have to climb up on a ladder and change a lens like you do with some other strobe units that you'll find in the industry. So next, let's talk a little bit about multicast. And these will, of course, be the same whether you're using one of our standalone strobes or whether you're using one of our accessory units. The same configuration will work. So when you're dealing with multicast, of course, we just want to touch on multicast. Multicast on our units work in a priority-based system where 9 is the highest priority, 0 is the lowest priority, and of course a higher priority will supersede a lower priority. SIP calls are right smack dab in the middle at priorities 4.5. So any multicast that comes in at group 0 through 4 will be superseded by a SIP call, meaning a SIP call will play over them. However, if a multicast is received at groups 5 through 9, they will play over a SIP call. So that's kind of how the priority engine works. So once you kind of understand that and you configure all of the different multicast groups, then you can go and set the different blink patterns accordingly. So of course, if you're dealing with emergency, you'd probably want to have that be kind of bright. So I set that one to, that'll be our, I think our green color there. That'll be our lime, if I remember correctly. So that'll get a nice little, kind of bright color out of the ordinary. You could use red for that, or really any color that you want, because you get that kind of capability. But this is just another way to interface with the strobes. All you have to do is set your multicast address and your port for the appropriate priority that you want, and then pick your color and your scene, and you're done. Really easy to work with. Next, we deal with InformaCast, of course, for either the InformaCast units, or if the accessory unit is connected to an InformaCast supporting devices. Of course, with the preface, this does have to support InformaCast registration. So if the device, either the standalone InformaCast enabled strobe or say an InformaCast enabled speaker that has the strobe kit connected, it does have to be registered with InformaCast to actually receive the messages. It's not going to work if you're not working with InformaCast. So that is just kind of a footnote there that is important. But much like Multicast, InformaCast works in a priority-based system where just regular 1 through 10, where 1 is the lowest priority and 10 is the highest priority. And the messages on InformaCast, when you actually create, say, one of the predetermined, pre-uploaded WAV files or MP3 files that you upload, when you're setting up the message itself, you could pick the priority and the volume level. And this priority that you'll see on the on our left-hand column here corresponds to the priority that you set for that particular message on InformaCast. So a priority level 5 message on InformaCast will be a priority level 5 message on a strobe. Pretty simple, just a regular priority-based system, and then you can set your scene or your blink pattern and your color accordingly. Next, we can get to the sensor options, which I think are really a very useful way to use these. Mainly with the door sense capability, the intrusion sense is kind of rarely used and rarely implemented by our customers. I think it's a really, really useful feature, but frankly, more so with intercoms or anything that you would that would be connected to access control. But that's a whole other topic on its own. But when you're dealing with anything with access control, it's typically a good idea to have the intrusion sensor configured. And of course, like all of the other blink options, if an accessory strobe kit is connected to an intercom or any of our other products that do support the strobe kit accessory, you'll have these capabilities, both for the sensor option, which would be our door sense, or the intrusion sensor or your tamper sensor. So with the door sensor, the unit can blink based on the status of the door, and that would be however you're actually determining that the door is closed. If you're dealing with the magnetic door sense, your door sensor would normally be closed. So that way, when the door is left open, the circuit is broken and the unit would know what to do. So you would set the door open timeout, which would be how long the unit would count to determine, okay, the door has been left open for, say, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. It kind of varies per implementation. The unit can take a couple actions. It can activate its local relay. It can play a call to a particular extension. Or with our strobe kit, it can blink. And that can be useful to just know that you know exactly what door is left ajar, so that way when that security gets that call that says the door ajar is in the west end of the factory, they know exactly what door is ajar because they got a nice little blinky light above that, and they can go deal with that. If they got somebody out there on a smoke break, they can go and kind of wave their finger at them, hey, you're not supposed to go smoke there, or gosh forbid somebody's trying to rob the place, and they kind of deal with that. But it's a great way to know that that door is left ajar, and really what I think is one of the cooler options that you can do with our strobe. Then of course we've got the intrusion sensor setting, your tamper sensor, which is a little bit more basic. You can't really configure how long it takes for the tamper sensor to trigger if it's activated, meaning that you've actually got the intrusion sensor set to do something. As soon as that intrusion sensor is set, and we set that into factory about 1/2 inch, you really just want to know as soon as that thing is undone and the unit has been tampered with, just removed from his faceplate a little bit, it's going to take an action. So that can, of course, either be making a call to an extension and playing a predetermined message, or as with our strobes, it blinks. So it gives you a lot of capability to know what's going on in particular areas with the strobe capability. So finally, let's talk a little bit if these strobes are right for the deployment. Visual notification is just so powerful when you're pairing it with auditory notification. So that way you get the main two senses that us as humans would typically use to know that there's some kind of notification going on. You hear it and you see it. You can't really feel that there's something going on. You can't taste that there's some kind of notification going on. So you want to be able to either hear it or see it. And that's what a strobe can do. It can take how you can already hear that notification going on, but then you can see that there's a notification going on with that strobe blinking. So again, it makes it super powerful in those areas where it's going to be kind of loud. Whether you're dealing with, say, a cafeteria that's full of kids and it's got that high ambient noise level, or you're dealing with a factory where it's going to have that high ambient noise level because of all those machines running. You need that additional visual notification, and strobes become so important for that. Then you can really put these in any indoor or outdoor environment. With our IP66 rating, you can put them just about anywhere. If they're going outdoors, they're fine if they get in rain, sleet, or snow, just like the post office. Or you can put them indoors if you're, dealing with some kind of a chip factory and they're getting covered in cheese dust. They can really go anywhere. So there's really no environment that you can't drop one of these things into. They just become so powerful for that. And then especially when you're dealing with emergency notifications, because at the end of the day, that's what you're using your notification system for the most part. You want to have that in the event of a fire, tornado, tsunami, what have you, some kind of an emergency. It's really what the whole system is for. You don't want anybody to miss that. Not only because, the potential loss of human life or just other mishaps that can happen. It's so vital that an emergency notification can go out because you spent all this dang money on a fancy notification system. You don't want to miss any notifications. So strobes are so powerful for those loud environments. If you're going to be doing anything that's loud, anything that needs hearing protection, strobes they really shouldn't be an afterthought, and unfortunately they are. And then finally, the one kind of downside that I can think of strobes, I was struggling with this, and when I came up with our presentation today, I really racked my mind. I couldn't think of any downsides for the strobes because they're so dang useful in just about any environment. And I guess one place that you wouldn't really need a strobe is a very quiet environment. If you're dealing with, say, like a library, you've got, proper coverage in there for all your speakers. It's dead quiet. You got students in there studying. They're going to be able to hear that notification going on because it's a library. It's quiet. So there really aren't any downsides to strobes. I think they're super duper powerful units, and I think they're right for just about any deployment. They might not be right for every area of a particular deployment, but you can more than likely use a strobe somewhere.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.